we'll get started with the Great Barrington Planning Board meeting for Thursday, August 22nd, 2024. This meeting is being recorded. Is there anyone else who's recording? No, no one else is recording. Okay. All right. Let's see. So at this moment, we are all here with the exception of Jeremy. But we'll go ahead. We've got a quorum, so we'll get started with the first item on our agenda, which is a Form A. So the Form A in front of us is for Cushion Hill Road, which is a portion, for a portion of map 32, lot 5H, owned by the Community Land Trust. And Mr. Pajolowski is here to talk us through what is being proposed.
Yes, this is by agreement with the fire district. The fire district needs to connect to the Housatonic Waterworks. This is the only convenient location to do that, so they need to install a pump house and hopefully some filtration. But we are selling that 1 acre to the firehouse, and the closing occurs 7 business days after the plan is endorsed.
Okay. All right, does anyone have any questions about the proposed subdivision, or excuse me, the proposed endorsement, non-subdivision?
I think we've seen this before.
We have
Yeah,
seen
I
this
think.
before in terms of the recommendation, and Chris said, we were talking before the meeting that we saw this as a recommendation to the select board, and they have waived their, or is that's a separate thing?
No, this is the
that's a
Form A,
separate
yeah.
thing. This is the Form A.
But yes, it looks familiar to you.
All right, do we have a motion to endorse?
So moved.
Thank you, Jonathan. Do we have a
Second.
second? Second from Malcolm. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
Thank
Unanimous.
you.
You are endorsed.
Clean water to Housatonic?
Do
Uh,
do we have
That's
a,
beyond my
just,
remit.
do we have a, Sharpie?
Yep.
I have one in the corner. Is there one right there?
So what date do you want it?
Well, today's fine. I mean, we got everything else ready to go.
Except the
I was just gonna say, you agree
Right.
that as a win to the meeting.
that.
I guess not.
We will, yeah,
It's
we
not
just
traditional.
like what's-
Yeah, it's not traditional.
Early September.
Oh, really?
So,
Okay.
You want it dated today?
Yeah, that's fine.
Today's the 22nd of August. All day.
We gave them right to state preparation before. the close, so there isn't that much of it.
I do not.
I'm gonna watch you folding it, you're gonna eat it then. I'll follow it. Like, since I can never remember from one meeting to the next time. Yeah, I'm sure it could, but you know, one of these days I have to work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
There's only. on my lap. All right, while we are folding and signing, we can move on to the minutes of August 8th. We have a motion to approve as amended. Thank you, Jonathan.
Second.
You were the second, thank you. Yeah, right, you talk apparently. All right, any further discussion on the minutes? No, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Abstain.
You're abstaining,
I
Malcolm's
wasn't here.
abstaining.
Did read the minutes carefully, but I
Okay.
wasn't here.
I'm gonna roll that up there. Missed the minute. Thank you. for this.
You missed the Form A.
I know.
Kim, you got that, Malcolm abstained. Thank you.
And they were dealing with. Chapter 61 here.
Yeah, I think.
Oh, I didn't know that.
The planning board recommendation.
Okay.
That's the next item. Yep, so next item on our agenda then is the chapter 61 right of first refusal, review and comment to the select board on whether the town should exercise or waive its chapter 61 right of first refusal to purchase 1 acre of land on Christian Hill Road. For the Form A we just discussed.
So the fire district is not the town.
It's separate entity.
It's a separate entity.
The fire district is not the town, that's correct. It's a quasi, right? Public.
So.
It is
I'll
public. It's just-
I'll move to send a positive recommendation that they should
Waive.
waive their right of
Okay,
first refusal.
so a positive recommendation to waive the right of first refusal on
That's
this.
just a recommendation.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be positive.
Sorry. We've got a motion. Do we have a second?
I have a
So,
second in question.
second in question by Jeremy, yes.
So so it's coming out of it?
The Community Land Trust has had it in classification since about 84. So we need to take it out so the fire district can construct the pumping station.
Any further discussion or? Yeah, and we saw it before a couple months ago. Okay. There's no further discussion. We'll vote. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, it's unanimous. Thank you. Have a good evening.
You're on the board here.
Yeah. Batting 1,000. Pretty good. All right.
2 for 1.
Let's see, I meant to have more information on this before I got here tonight. So next item on our agenda is community compact best practices discussion of funding opportunities in the best practices program. So yes, we had received I think through Berkshire Regional Planning, is that right?
Yes.
Did you want to introduce this?
No, go ahead.
Okay, do you know, you probably know more about it than
I don't know much about it.
You don't.
I know a little, not a lot.
And so there were best practices that were shared out. I don't know if anyone got a chance to read through those best practices. Jackie did.
Jackie did.
There were a few things as I read through it that I thought might be interesting as we're having our master plan
That's what I was
discussion.
thinking too.
Yeah, particularly some of the age friendly. And it seemed to me, Chris, I don't know if it's maybe something we want to breeze through now and see, just touch upon like where we may have already done some degree of engagement, because some of them seem like we have been maybe leading some of the efforts on best practices as it relates. We had some DEI training. There were a few on some types of housing that I think we've been leading on. What does everybody think?
I didn't know whether this is the first time we're seeing something like this. Is this a new program or?
It's not new. The community, it's called the Community Compact Cabinet. And it was first started by the Baker Polito administration as a way to get technical assistance to communities in a range of areas. And everything from comprehensive planning to working on zoning bylaws for housing production to
DEI to,
economic development initiatives, all sorts of different things. The program the summary was provided to you as a hyperlink in tonight's agenda. And hopefully you had a chance to go through that. So every year, the state, since it was created and the Healy administration has kept it up. They send out a solicitation for communities to apply, and only certain communities are eligible every year. I think if you've received one in the last year, you can't apply the subsequent year and so forth. In any case, Great Barrington is eligible this year. In past years, we've received assistance in creating financial policies for the town, personnel, HR handbook for the town, technology and information technology work in the town. We've also done work on open space planning and other areas that might be interesting to this board. I think we did some housing work under the compact, under the cabinet. So we've been taking advantage of this program for 5, 6, 8 years at least. And we're eligible again this year. Brandy asked that we put it on the agenda for discussion.
The support that we would get from the state, is that monetary or is it people or information?
It depends what we need. Sometimes all we need is money to pay a consultant or a contractor. Sometimes we need technical expertise or both. It's really, it's a very user-friendly program, and the state is very good about working with communities to figure out what sort of scope of services and type of assistance will best address.
So underneath all these categories, they have best practices outlined. Now, are they suggestions or do you have to meet one of those best practices?
You have to work towards one of those best practices.
Okay,
Yes.
So can the grant encompasses something as broad as a master plan, or does it have to be specific to
there's certain areas.
certain areas?
It could, it certainly won't pay for the entire
Yeah,
effort, but
but-
it certainly could supplement the town's efforts with that.
And what's the deadline for applying for it?
Believe it's a rolling basis
Okay,
It is.
until
just
funds are exhausted for that.
yeah, that year.
And there are just some interesting things here that do we want to look at it? Talk about it later or after we have a chance?
Well,
to
it seems
look
to
at
me
it?
we should look at in two ways. Number one, is there some way to get money out of this?
Yeah,
And number two, is there information in here that would help us with the master plan?
because it's good to have you guys look at it because you'll know what you've already done.
Mhm.
Because they outlined so many things that seem not appropriate or we've been there and done that.
Right.
But then there are other things that if the language is broad enough, it helps with outreach or also certain kinds of exercises and or I was thinking about the energy and environmental best practices. I mean, there's all sorts of things that are sitting in here that
Mhm.
seem rich to.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, I mean, it's-
If you don't mind, just 1 second though, in the context that Chris, you just framed this up in, was there anything you or staff at the town have already identified as something you'd like to pursue under this program? Because
We've not given it any thought.
you've
just
not,
yet.
okay,
And you can take one or two. I mean, they're pretty nice and loose in the way they're offering support.
yeah, I just thought if there were priorities that had been identified and we could align with them, that would maybe just bolster an
Oh,
application.
Beavers are smart to do that.
Yeah, so, okay.
And is this just towns that can apply to this, or I was thinking like, did the school district use this before? And would that be separate from the town, or would that?
If so, yes, it would.
So, I mean, we just high level, we can run through the categories. So the first category is age and dementia friendly best practices. And I think in general, the sort of programmatic best practices seem to be related to completing like needs assessments and convening stakeholder groups for evaluating needs, developing policies and implementing practices under that age and dementia friendly best practices. The next category is diversity, equity, and inclusion best practices.
I thought that was interesting.
We have done some
I'm
of
looking at
that.
public engagement. It's like develop an initiative to improve and increase community engagement, particularly with underrepresented members of the community and young people.
We actually have a program like that ongoing now.
Yeah,
You do? Okay.
and we're lucky to have Multicultural Bridge, you know, that has engaged the town a lot with DEI training.
I was just thinking actually more about outreach of and relating to the master plan.
Mhm.
Yeah,
That might be a way to,
It's another way.
fund.
I think we
Yes,
have to
okay.
think about what could actually, like, the specifics of that, right? We have to come up with some sort of programmatic
It
specifics.
seemed like that this, did you encounter this with the school district too? Like they're doing something with. for
I think if
all
they are,
kids, or all parents having kids participate in sports have to do.
oh, yeah, no, I don't remember hearing that, no, but that would be separate. and
just-
apart.
Yeah, I know, it's
Yeah.
just.
Yeah, the third category is economic development best practices. More business economic development process focused. But I did like this one of identifying and establishing priority development sites.
I pulled that one out. too.
Hmm.
I have a question about that. For Chris. So if we're looking at the map in town. We're looking at some properties that we think would be right for development. Similar, I guess, to how we handled the smart growth overlay district research. Like, what kind of engagement do we have with the property owners? How much engagement do we need to have? I mean, you can't just. As a board decide, I mean, we could, but it would probably be best practice if we just decided we're gonna target these. Properties and.
Target sounds so negative. How about invite?
Yeah,
Right,
that's what I mean.
Right.
Is there, what do we do for during the smart growth overlay district stuff? Well, I think it makes most sense to talk to the property owners. Is that what happened during smart growth? I have to go back through my notes, Pedro. I don't recall, but that would be the way to go about it. I mean, it wouldn't make much sense to review a site for development if the owners have no intention ever to develop it. So I think there
plans.
yeah, you'd have to see if it's a viable study at all.
Chris, what is this one on establishing expedited permitting process, including chapter 43D?
43D is a state program that allows streamlined review of permits. It's something that we looked at maybe 15 years ago when I first started. It's I don't recall all the specifics, but it's not necessarily advantageous
Mhm,
to the town.
yeah. So let's see. The next category is energy and environment best practices. These are around greenhouse gas reduction, renewable energy, climate change, sustainable development. A lot of these look like things we have already begun to explore. So have we done MVP for the town?
We've done at least 3.
And we've done green communities program, so I feel like we're ahead of the curve on energy and environment best practices. That also includes things like waste management, site cleanup and agriculture.
What includes sustainable development, water, or inland protection and master planning.
And do we currently have an open space plan?
We do, it's outdated.
Oh, okay, so potentially could be used to update an open space plan.
We have grant funds in place for that. I believe I reported to the board that we hope to start that this year.
So you jumped over education best practices,
Did it?
Mhm.
Oh, I did, I'm sorry,
and I just wanted to ask if,
not intentional.
no, it's just-
2 pages.
I had just pulled out a question for Chris is, do we have internship opportunities for high school and college students to work with the city town?
Yeah,
We do,
Yeah.
so that's something, that was just a
that
best
just
practice.
happens. We just.
Isn't that how I got to take Coleman?
Yeah, we've had a number of really good interns.
Yeah, we've had a number of.
Joe Brock. So following energy financial management best practices, that probably isn't gonna fall to the planning board. Maybe something more the select board is interested in. General management and governance best practices, probably more select board focused. Housing and livable communities best practices, so among them are having an affordable housing trust fund, we have that. I was looking for things that we hadn't already done, and nothing really jumped out at me, Chris. Did you see something otherwise?
That's all right.
Housing and livable communities. It's affordable housing trust fund,
Do we have housing choice community designation?
Yes.
and then housing production plan, which I don't know if we need.
It's not advantageous to, our efforts are far ahead of that.
Yeah, and then smart growth, we already have.
Hmm.
Amend zoning to reduce required off-street parking spaces for residential development. I think we've done
Talked
that.
about that.
ADUs, we've already done. Perform a comprehensive review of zoning bylaws through an informed racial equity and civil rights lens. I don't think we've done that, but I don't know if we,
Not sure. that
do we have a
those
lot of
are
exclusionary zones?
Priorities.
Yeah. So there was really nothing in housing and livable communities that jumped out at me. Anybody else see anything here that jumped out at them? That we haven't done? Next was human resources best practices.
That's more.
That's,
internal.
yeah, IT best practices would be internal, mental health best practices. Unless we all need to take a mental health break here at the planning board from time to time, I think. Probably okay. Public health, public safety, I mean, I think some of these get more.
No, I had, do we have an emergency preparedness plan?
Oh, yeah.
I figured we would, but I don't know it. Is it on the website?
Probably not. I mean, there's. On the website is a hazard mitigation and climate adaptation plan.
Yeah.
There's also something different, which is how the town responds to emergencies. That's a comprehensive emergency management plan. That's probably not on the website.
I used to work for the Office of Emergency Preparedness in DC, so,
Yeah,
and saw the state and the county and the feds working together pretty effectively.
yeah, that's something that we do on an ongoing basis.
Then there's regionalized shared services best practices. Again, I don't think those are planning board level. Transportation and public works. The only one there I thought was the, oh, there's complete streets, which we already have a policy, right?
Mhm.
And transit oriented development, we don't really have like that robust of a transit infrastructure that we could do anything there. I did like this one, prepare and implement a speed management policy to encourage safe vehicle speeds in neighborhoods.
I'm referring to something like that.
We sort of do that already.
Do
with
we?
The use of radar signs, there's the speed controls throughout the neighborhoods.
Yeah. And then resilient and reliable transportation.
I still think there are areas in town, you know, beyond the circle. Speed limit jumps. I'm not saying about enforcement, I'm not talking about enforcement, but, you know, down there, I think the speed limit is high, State Road is high, above Cottage Street, it just changes. Even though there's enforcement there. I don't know what we do, but, you know,
What does it change to?
We're, oh, and we're.
No,
Stop
beyond,
reserve.
no, I'm thinking about beyond Cottage Street.
no, well, the Cottage Street goes to 35, but it's much greater. It's almost as if the highway starts there because it continues through State Road and then all the way out of town. The speeds throughout that area should be 35, and obviously not. But very concerned, I think, would be below the circle.
So that raises the question, do we have a plan or do we just do things?
Maybe we should do
Is
things.
there a written transportation plan? Transportation safety plan? That's what this calls for.
The Complete Streets plan did discuss street design and traffic calming. And so we do try to follow that and get grants to implement that.
Okay.
In certain areas it maybe something that we work more with the state DOT on. In certain areas, it may just be the road is designed for high speed. And people go 45 when they should be going 35.
Well,
Road design is
But
a
that's, you know,
major-
again, that's.
see, we've had an ongoing question about Blue Hill Road, that goes up the hill near our house, and we walk up there all the time. And there's no speed limit signs. And apparently there's no speed limit. Now, Blue Hill Road on the other side, which is a much narrower road, has a 30-mile-an-hour speed limit. And when we've asked the town over and over again to review what the speed limit is there, nothing happens. And so I'm wondering what the plan is, what the town's plan is, what is the, like, you know, what is the nominal speed limit on, you know, on built-up roads or on, you know, streets or,
If it's not posted,
yeah.
they don't.
Yeah, so I don't, yeah, I think it should be posted frankly, but that's, I mean, when we looked for you know, what was codified in terms of what the town's policy is in terms of speed and speed limits. Couldn't find it. I don't know if there is something, that's the.
You know, up above, on Route 41, above Main Street, Housatonic, I mean, it seems like the neighborhood there is doing enforcement. Seriously,
Yeah,
so I think speeds is an issue.
yeah, I mean,
Especially-
in soccer, you got so, the citizens petition to impose 25 miles an hour all the time. And if there's not, and people don't know what the plan is for the town, that could happen.
I've never lived anywhere where the speed limit changes so often in one road.
I think that's Massachusetts, actually.
That's, it's really distressing because sometimes it's hidden by a tree and you're supposed to go, and you just don't know what to do. And I thought maybe if I had to take a driver's ed class, I would find out that 20 miles per hour is always the speed limit for this kind of a moment.
Yeah.
Or this is 35 and you should never do blah, 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 but I'm always flummoxed because it's just odd.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it's,
Typically, the speed limits are set based on like the density and the use of that segment of the roadway.
No,
Drive Route 7 in Lennox, the speed limit changes 5 times within 2 miles.
Yeah, I don't know what the historical one is, but just in general.
I mean, it seems to me that if we really
speeding tickets.
do want to create more diverse transit opportunities, more walkability in town. There should be a plan. And to say that there's an existing condition and we should just accept it, I don't know that that's really,
I don't think that's what I said. I was just trying to
Yeah.
explain the context.
I don't think, I'm not saying you said that, you know.
The complete streets plan was put together like 5 years ago.
Yeah, I was wondering if we could revisit that.
Well, part of this discussion around the master plan update is like, what other plans has the town done in the intervening time and what elements from them should be brought forward in terms
and
of.
I think about Stockbridge Road and the speed, and if we're trying to get housing on either side of that street, you want to slow down the traffic. I mean, you want to have people walking down sidewalks and with their kids and pulling off in these different areas and planting trees on the side so it looks more green. But do you still want to have this corridor that is 7 and going at a certain pace?
We'll stop with it.
North Stockbridge Road.
Well, some of that, I mean, Pedro, and we've discussed this for many years, right? So some of it is driven by the fact that we don't control all the streets.
I know it's
Right.
like DOT carries.
Yeah.
Sets the. speed.
And so part of the zoning change for the B2X is to try and move buildings to the front and improve walkability to start moving in the direction of usership of alternatives to vehicles, bikes and pedestrian rising so that we can make that case that.
Oh, it's to make the case.
Yeah,
That's our problem, our
Yeah.
project in the future.
and I think it doesn't help that we've lost a lot of trees along that route too.
Yeah, I mean, I
And
think,
it feels very open and that is known to help people just feel like they should drive faster through that corridor. So there's a lot that, I don't know that, I think we want to be cognizant of it. And see what we can do to like drive a update on the master plan to bring that corridor to be more pedestrian
And I
friendly.
think that's a great idea.
Pedro's given it a lot of thought. I'm waiting for him to say something.
There's a hole in the tape.
There's a whole section on Stockbridge Road, which would be great if you had, like, when you see the complete streets, how they have that like greenway in the middle. You know, with like gaps for cars to get into streets, that would be a great place for them.
Yeah, this is the time of year you see families risking their lives to cross Stockbridge Road to get something to eat.
Well, what I do
Hotel
is,
to the brewery, there's a lot of that
Yeah,
sprinting.
yeah,
The
Yeah.
hotels, not just the. brewery.
that's the overpass, right? The
Yeah.
drunken overpass.
So
You need to get to
Brandy,
the
could I
hall, yeah.
revisit the emergency preparedness thing?
yeah, sure.
For a second.
What's your comment? there?
It's just basically, I'm thinking one of the. A major emphasis, at least from the last master plan, will be climate change.
Mhm.
And I'm thinking about, are there escape routes when the fires in certain areas and the roads are so narrow, are there some? Do we have an escape route plan? And because I know that for flooding, we can't get out and we can't get out. Are there rules, regs,
I think the hazard
recommendations?
mitigation plan has evacuation routes identified.
I don't know.
Yeah. So we probably should review the hazard mitigation plan at some point and see what elements in it relate to, land use and, I have not looked at ours, I've looked at others, and often a hazard mitigation plan will include things like evacuation routes, but they tend to be geared more towards flooding. Because it's a FEMA driven program, and so flood hazard is typically something that's high here, whereas fire hazard typically is not something that's high
No, but
here.
I'm just looking.
Yeah, no, but just historically, that's what drives the
And
response.
as it gets more dry. I mean, nobody was thinking about that in Maui. I mean, just being from why,
Yeah,
when you live there, you never thought about wildfires.
Forest fire in the rainforest.
right. No, I think it's important, we gotta think about it.
And it is really getting, like, the woods are getting drier every year.
Yeah.
And so it's gonna be a
And
thing,
there's a lot of dead.
and especially if we're
Standing
building to the street, I mean, you're right.
Yeah. So, who has responsibility? Is it the fire department or the police department
For what?
for evacuation safety?
I think it depends on what the particular instance is.
Well, I mean, it's like a plan, looking at all the different possible hazards.
Our emergency management director is our chief of police. Who works closely with all of the department heads and surrounding towns.
So they're the ones who would draw and revise and update.
Right. Yeah,
So maybe that should be considered as part of the master plan, to update the emergency management plan, make sure the emergency management plan is updated to reflect changes in conditions in the town.
I can see
or
that
risks.
being a recommendation.
Yeah, a recommendation.
Master plan.
No, that's not for us to do it.
Not planning board,
I mean, that really has, I mean,
but this
that's,
is all triggered by this document that we've been asked to look at.
Well, so I guess that's, I don't think we have to make a decision now. Why don't we review more closely the community compact best practices? Nothing jumped out at me that was huge as it relates to land use. But if the program's on a rolling basis, can we get back to Chris and with a couple of ideas?
Yes, that's fine.
So, Pedro had a good suggestion to look at the land use section in volumes 1 and 2. And kind of at a high level, understand what the changes in land use have been over the last 10 years. So who has a master? Do we all have our master plans?
I have it on my computer.
Pedro, in terms of goal for reviewing the land use section, is the thought process to brainstorm what development has occurred and identify what opportunities still remain for land use development? I mean, we've talked about existing resources in the community, floodplains, lands that are already protected, and we don't have a lot of developable lands, right? A huge amount of developable land left, so.
No, I mean, to be clear, what I suggested when we were putting the agenda together is that we run through all the categories one at a time, little by little. And land use, I mean, I just brought up the example that I could do review land use, and I still think if the board thinks it's a good idea to do that as we move forward, to go through all the categories. As far as land use, I mean,
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 under. Referring to like goal.
no, I'm talking about all the categories in the master plan.
Oh. ongoing subcategories of.
Yeah,
land use.
What I'm suggesting is that that's, in the next months that we go through. Natural resource, economic development, housing, all of those things, and just kind of review it so that we can all understand a little bit more about. What we're dealing with in terms of the master, but in terms of proposing an update or a rewrite of this thing.
We did demographics last time, if everyone remembers, right?
So what would be the output of a review like this? I think a yes or no, or maybe on each,
Or identify a simple problem.
or it's no longer valid, or it's no longer applicable,
Well, so, what we've done so far is that there were implementable items on our master plan list,
Yeah,
right?
so-
And we already have a list of like which have been implemented and which have not been implemented. If we're thinking about a master plan update, I would think part of what we're doing is looking at these goals and strategies and seeing which are still relevant. And maybe what has changed in the community and maybe would trigger a more focused conversation on new strategies.
It sounds like we're going back to the ranking, when we.
I don't think
went
it's
through
a
the master
ranking.
plan at the beginning with the 1, 2, 3, 4, like in progress.
I don't see it like that at all.
No.
No, I think it's more
more
like
work.
what has changed in our community that says we should revisit, what has changed in Housatonic? Is Housatonic thriving? Is it a mixed use village? Like, is that still a relevant goal?
so,
Has anything happened to undercut that?
Yeah.
One of the,
Assumptions.
one of the things I thought we had established as a near-term objective is to determine whether we're going to rewrite or modify or just leave alone the master plan that we have,
Mhm.
right? So would that be one of the purposes here is to say, okay, well, the land use section is, 80% good, but it could use some work, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think the goal is the same as it was at our last time when we were discussing demographics, and I don't know if you got the flavor from the minutes, Malcolm, but like, we're trending older,
Yeah,
housing's
okay.
more expensive, like, so we've got goals and strategies that maybe we're focused on children and youth, maybe those are not relevant, maybe we need to pivot to how do we attract young families?
So what was the conclusion of demographics in relation to our
Was it
current master
demographics
plan?
or data?
It was demographic information, demographic data,
I know
yes.
there's a lot of
Demographics
discussion
is
about
data.
what's changed and what data is valid and what data isn't valid, and do we have the data?
We
need?
didn't draw any conclusions, we just reviewed the data,
Okay.
yeah, to see what's different.
But to Malcolm's point, I think that should be the goal or the purpose of going through the goals in volume 1, is to look at them and to determine whether or not they need revision or overhaul, or that's what
Yes. Absolutely.
Another way to look at it too, I mean, I think that's a good way to go, but another way is. Just ourselves making, I'm actually thinking about you guys, not me, because I don't have the history. But what has changed, what do you perceive to have changed? I mean, before you even go through the master plan and just think the big changes, and then the master plan becomes a trigger for everything else. But I think it's good to kind of do a visceral check.
Why not have that discussion now?
Yeah, no,
I
I
think
think,
that
I
would
think
be a
that's,
good one.
that would be the goal, there's,
You can have it in the context of land use. What has changed? What feels different? What feels undone?
I think that's a good way to start before we go.
Piece
Point
by
by point.
piece.
I'm afraid if we don't follow these categories, that we will have such a wide-ranging conversation that we won't capture the specifics.
of
We,
the agenda item on that.
well, I'm not even worried about the agenda so much, I'm just worried about, like,
I
we
agree.
think very broadly about things in the community, and I think by focusing on land use and going through these goals and seeing if they're still relevant and seeing if there's something new or something, detrimental that's happened, that we at least stay focused on the land use piece and we don't end up talking about farmland protection or something that is, well, farmland protection probably is.
Yeah, I think it's a little closer.
Can I start?
Go for it, Malcolm.
This, I mean, if you start with the land use, the first section. Great Barrington has 2 villages, centers, and a very compact commercial core bounded closely by residential neighborhoods and surrounded open space. Still true? Yes. This efficient productive pattern of development should be reinforced. I don't know if that's still true. And then the third thing was new residents are occupying more land to house fewer people. That's still true?
And I think we looked at demographic data that said that average household size is dropping, so yeah, that's.
But, you know,
True.
I think, you know,
And is there something else here that they're not capturing?
so again, respectfully, that what you're reading is a sort of the summary, which I think is great, and I took some questions out of the summary as well. But as we move through
The
it,
foundation, though, right?
sure,
So if there's something,
but I think for the purposes of our review, it should stick to not rewriting the document itself, but kind of looking at the goals. Right, I don't know that it'd be good for us to start debating, you know, what needs to be included in a new master plan or in a review. Is just to kind of be objective about what's in the books now. And just, you know, determine whether or not it's kind of what you're doing to a degree. But I think it's more effective within the master plan to go through the goals, because what you're reading is defined in the goals. I think.
well, I mean, I get that, but I would, my personal preference is to take a top-down approach. Say, okay, here's what our overall goals are, you know, and this is what's included in the introduction.
It can be both. I
Yeah.
think it can be both,
Well,
but
I don't have a problem getting bottom.
I'm gonna layer in also part of what I wanna make sure if we're updating the master plan, we are including is that we're building off of all the other work that's been done in the last 10 years. So, yeah, I've been trying to annotate, you know, what other planning documents have been produced by the town, not necessarily this board, that we should be pulling relevant elements in, because I think too often we're doing planning exercises and plans go on a shelf and they don't get implemented. And we've got all these, all this work that has already been done. Let's build from that. Let's not like reinvent the wheel. So,
But so Brandy, for example, when you're saying that, you were responsible to talk to the select board about what their tasks were that they were assigned and which ones they achieved and which ones they didn't. Does that not satisfy this exercise too, or is that also not a piece of this exercise?
I think it's all part and parcel, right? That's very targeted on the implementation side of things. But in terms of like gathering additional information, you know, the hazard mitigation and climate adaptation plan that Chris just mentioned, I've not read it. I don't even think I've opened the document to read the table of contents to see like which elements make sense from a land use standpoint, but I would guess it's got a lot of interesting information about climate change and flood management and hazard routes and, you know, things that would be important for the discussion. So, you know, I want to make sure we're gathering the resources in addition to assessing, you know, just with our own objective and subjective opinions.
I'm sitting here thinking, oh my God, the scale and the scope of what we're doing now. It's pretty intense.
That's why we have to bite off a chunk.
I'd like to get a sense that that's what we're going to do with every page in the master plan and look at it and discuss it. I mean, or at least as you're saying goals, I mean, it's broken down very neatly in land use, going to page whatever.
I
Like
think it is in every chapter though, so I mean, I think, yes, it's a big task, but yes,
strategy, LUH1, H2, H3, H4.
we won't get through it unless we get started.
But if that's what our intent is.
Our intent is to go,
And practice go first with land use.
because it is the first chapter with goals, yes.
Well,
And like
let's do it.
chronologically, let's just go.
Go to the goals.
Give it a shot.
So there, from the intro, I've got 3 questions that maybe we can answer early. The one was already brought up about the declining household size, but the increase in lot sizes. Do we have any evidence that that's continued?
I don't have that data in terms of increased lot sizes.
There's a mention in here about fiber on Stockbridge Road. There's no fiber, but there's Time Warner or Spectrum, right? Along the Stockbridge Road.
There will be fiber optic on Stockbridge Road this year,
Okay,
or early next year, to Housatonic and feeding Housatonic Village.
and then the last question on that I have on that intro part is about farmland. Do we have any idea how much farmland is currently active? And I don't mean for hay, I mean, you know, for grazing or for actually growing food.
No, I don't have that data, but I would say hay is important.
Sure.
It's active farmland,
Of course.
certainly active open space and important for open space conservation purposes, and species purposes. It's a critical part of the farmland. What makes the farm work, so.
Farm.
The assessor has all
I was gonna
Da-
say, we
data.
can get that data
It's
from
either
the
in
assessor
61
if we
A or
needed
it's
it.
that APR.
Yeah, I mean. Not everything's in APR, is it?
No.
But, oh,
My
decent,
land's not in APR, but it's
oh,
in
decent
in 61 A.
yeah.
These are things that, you know, if we're working on a master plan and we're talking about agriculture, we would dig into this question. We would go to the assessor, we would get that data and say, oh my gosh, all these lands are in chapter 61A, which is actually working. Well, we know he sold the farm, they sold the herd, and this is when you start to really dig into the data from the assessor and figure out what it really means and what's happening on the ground and what interventions from a policy perspective are appropriate. But, you know, just discussing on this level, I don't have.
I was just asking just because, you know, to determine whether or not, you know, the stuff is relevant. If we had quick answers on it, I wasn't expecting that we would, but.
Yeah,
just some questions I had.
sometimes we have data and we can answer those questions, but I think sometimes it may just be a gut. As Jackie said, how do we feel about this? Are we addressing farms and farmland? Well, what do we think?
I would talk to Berkshire Grown. Et cetera, et cetera.
Is it important?
Well, we also have an ag
Community.
committee that is doing a lot of thinking about farmland on a regular basis, and they've been not as active lately, just due to the leadership not having the same capacity that they used to have. But I think I would like to lean into them in terms of agricultural things, and so I think we can, you know, if we need to get information from someone who's more focused on a particular topic, I think we can use this as an opportunity to identify who that entity is and use that as part of our engagement strategy.
Is our exercise here also to update all the tables and graphs in the part 2 of the master plan?
I
So
would
it
say
shows
that is
what to
not
buy.
this exercise. Yeah, no,
That is the exercise of the master. plan.
right.
That is
And
part
but
of that.
that
exercise.
is going to be happening, so data is being,
If we decide to update the master plan, yes.
well, there's updating and there's updating.
No, there's just updating.
Okay, so goal 1 is about Housatonic. So there's info in there about redeveloping the mills, about the school. Village core, and the one question I had is that there's a bit in here about character, and you guys are gonna hear from me about character again. Because it's interesting, you know. The character of Housatonic, and it says in here specifically somewhere. A historic scale and historic character, well. I looked through Bertie Drew's book, but when the mills were happening. And that place was happening. I mean, there were people all over the place, there were stores everywhere, so. I think, you know, stuff like that in here needs to be rethought, because. If it's historic that we're thinking about, it could be something that, you know, we bring back, or it could be a goal that we want is to have that community be. A vibrant community with mixed uses and lots of people, you know. You get my point about character, like the character that's there is not it's the character of Housatonic maybe the last 30 years, but it's not the historic character of the community. Thing.
So in terms of that though, like looking at this narrative where it's got an intro paragraph and then the strategies, there are several things that jump out at me in the intro paragraph that I think are relevant for today's discussion regarding changes in how we feel about, like, just viscerally, is this goal being met? And one huge one, you know, is the water. The water infrastructure that has come to light in a bigger way in the last couple of years, and it's obviously a challenge for growth and development in the village. So I think we have to add that. The other thing though, zoning, I mean, Jonathan, you and Kim even, there's been a lot of attempt to undo the 1960s zoning with.
When this master plan that's in front of you was written, the zoning of Housatonic did not support a compact, thriving, mixed-use village.
Yeah.
It does now.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I think
We
that
changed virtually everything.
Right,
major step forward that arose directly out of this master plan goal.
yeah,
There are some
that
things
has
that
been-
haven't happened that are abiding issues still. The mills, while partially occupied, remain
Our mill overlay
a
district is.
large opportunity.
has-
So is it
Is
safe
that
to-
opportunity still something that the community at large thinks is there, thinks should be taken advantage of? If so, for what? Housing, hotels, what? You know, that's a conversation I think you could embrace.
So is it safe to say that we still support a compact, thriving, mixed-use village in Housatonic, but the details of this need to be revisited?
yes, and I
Is that
think
the
that
kind of, that's the
the-
kind of outcome? we
the
wanna come out?
actions we've taken in the last 10 years have been towards this goal. I think they've been positive towards.
Oh, yeah, there's been a lot of actions.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to figure out how we check something off. Okay, here's a goal.
Yeah.
It's still a goal, but it needs to be revised.
And this is one in particular, I'd like to just like clip the whole thing and send it to the Housatonic Improvement Committee and say, chew on this and get
Well,
back to us.
Yeah, but they're not just gonna get back to us. We want to have a community
Well,
engagement.
this is what I'm
This
thinking
is-
about, this is collecting.
But we've gotta
discussions
start
with the
somewhere. We
community.
can't just have a community engagement that is like wide
I'm
ranging.
not saying that, I'm saying we just identified something, or we're raising something, and we want to hear, we want to talk, once we refine our thinking, we want to get back into the community and.
Absolutely, 10,000%, but
but
we
I-
don't even know what we want to engage the community on. So that's why we need to go through this exercise, like, what do we need to engage people on?
Well, I mean, I agree with you, Brandy. I don't think we want to send this out now to the Housatonic Improvement Committee. We don't even want to think about how we're going to do that. What we want to do at this point is just say, are we gonna revise this or are we gonna rewrite it?
We don't know.
We don't
We
know.
haven't had that
So,
conversation.
but we have to go through this, all of these sections to say, okay, this one's okay, this one gets eliminated, this one gets rewritten, this one gets revised. And then at the end, we'll have, you know, however many items there are in here, and we'll.
I appreciate that perspective, and I agree with you. Ultimately, that's where we want to be. I don't think that's tonight, though. I think
No,
tonight,
tonight's the first step in
It's-
land use.
a first, but even just a first pass through this, right? Like, this is just kind of, what is everybody's
If
first
we
impression?
can get through it, I think by the end of it, we as a committee will realize whether or not land use needs to be tossed out and rewritten, or if it just needs to be updated. That should be the goal here. There's not a detailed, you know.
What
of
time
every
does everyone
single
need to
thing,
get home by?
You know,
Well, I
it
don't
should-
think we need to, we don't, yeah, I mean, I don't think Pedro's suggesting we need to address and solve each item.
Agreed, yeah, no, I agree.
And
This is gonna be iterative.
I'm only bringing up points just for some kind of discussion and to have it, you know, so that there is some discussion as to what's in here. And whether or not it's relevant, or maybe that it needs a little bit of updating, and maybe down the road, somebody's gonna comment on something. I've got a goal in here that I think needs to be completely redone, so that's the kind of stuff, I think if we can get through it, we'll collectively be able to check off land use as rewrite or
Yeah, or, yeah, or at least
tossed
we-
out or whatever.
that,
So we,
I'm actually almost thinking maybe we should table the discussion and I'll do some homework. Because we took the strategies and we turned them into like actionable items, right? And we've already done this exercise of which of the strategies have we
Well, that was,
implement, yeah. So, you know,
But just stepping back again. Housatonic. The critical part of the town, a lot of your friends and neighbors live there. It's important from a land use perspective to use that area wisely, to support it and ensure that it can still thrive. It has the infrastructure, public facilities and support to thrive. It has fantastic opportunities, the river, the mountains, those mills, some of which haven't yet been realized, that could benefit everyone in town, not least those who live in the village.
But it's not gonna happen until they fix the water.
So is that still in, so
it's still,
generally, yes. That is an area of town that should always be a focus of this board. Keep it in, move on.
agreed.
Okay,
Now, number two.
what those specifics are, we don't know until we have conversations with the community. So yes, keep it in, let's move on. We don't know how it will change or should it change. Yeah,
We have to put water in.
yeah,
Water-
there's some things
Yeah,
really that need to be existential.
I think part of the conclusion has to be that some of the goals here have been satisfied and some outside factors have introduced new goals, like water.
Well, and I think the water should be instructive for the rest of the town, because that they're in it doesn't mean we won't be in the same situation. There's comments we don't.
Chris, I have a question for you. There's mention here of Housatonic walkability report. Do we have access to it?
Yes. That report was done, I want to say 2011, 2012. It looked at sidewalk networks.
Does that also include getting to Housatonic?
It was about the village itself. It was, we did surveys, people in the village, and walk routes, sidewalk routes, what needed to be improved.
and in the last 10 years, there's been a fair amount of investment in walking routes and sidewalks and most recently,
Sidewalk out to Main Street.
Yeah,
Yeah.
rail trail improvements.
And the rail
things like
trail.
that. Yeah,
But that doesn't talk about connection to the rest of Great Barrington.
no, it was for the village just itself. Yeah. I can send that to the board.
I'd be curious in looking at it.
okay.
Thank you.
Second goal is about downtown Great Barrington. So downtown that continues to prosper as a regional hub of business, employment, entertainment, and civic life.
I got a question there.
Go for it.
Chris, if you, in 2013, when this thing came out, like what properties were blighted?
The New England Law Home. Right,
The log home site,
Searle School.
Searle School, entire campus, including Bryant.
Yeah.
Housatonic School.
Just
No,
downtown,
this is
Downtown.
downtown.
Yeah.
the property,
Three cleaners.
three cleaners up by Cottage Street, which is now across from Cumberland Farms itself.
What is that,
Still
the
Cumberland
magazine?
Boulevard,
For the,
on the corner of Cottage and Main.
yeah,
It was sometimes known as the Depot Supply.
So with the jewelry store, the last.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've heard of that.
Yeah.
And out there.
There were other properties on.
The old store on State Road,
Across the street. Just now demolished.
St.
The
James,
deli.
St. James.
St. James Church,
Yeah.
yeah.
so there's been a lot of investment in correcting blight.
Right.
I think of the list, it's just really Reed Cleaners
Reed
that's left, and that's just a really pernicious problem.
And the firehouse, right?
But that one's being restored as well, right?
Yeah, it was vacant at the time. wasn't it?
That's true, it was,
I think we just had offices. Maybe we stored equipment.
and the Main Street reconstruction project is done, so what else in terms of downtown
D4,
land use?
D4 is going extending the river one.
Mhm.
Partials, no.
Hmm?
And south, not north.
There's not
Right,
connected.
was there a plan to extend? There's a whole, yeah. But it does say worth and second.
I'm thinking this would probably be something that would get rewritten.
Yeah,
Needs to be updated. or
Yep, yep.
New conditions.
As goal 3, I think needs to be completely rewritten.
goal 3.
The whole thing, I hate it. I think it's awful and it doesn't, I mean, I just have a different idea of what. Stockbridge Road should be in the next 40 or 50 years.
What about the deli, the old deli? So who's tearing it down?
The town owns it and, was sort of an emergency demolition. We didn't have the funds to do it, so the butter decided to go ahead and do that.
So a lender's doing it or,
Correct.
but they don't own it? Or are they going to own it? How does that work?
No, the town will own it through tax foreclosure process.
All right,
It's still a toxic waste site,
It's still a petroleum spill. The building. The building was completely unsafe and in danger of pulling the wall of BCC with it when it fell.
Oh, fun.
Right, so we're good. Yeah. Anyway, talk about blight.
good times, yeah. It's good to get rid of blight though. So.
There's been a lot. Yeah, I mean, through private development, there's been a lot.
Huge amount of investment in the town.
It's really.
Yeah,
And speaking of blight, they're putting windows in on 148 Maple.
there, yeah.
No.
Yeah,
Oh, my God.
Yeah, no, it's,
back to working on it. That's great.
And
So
then,
anyway,
and that house
this
we
goal,
got east and Humphreys. No, it's. That was kind of.
so this goal 3, from my point of view, is still. Portraying Stockbridge Road as a, a strip mall.
A business corridor.
Right, exactly. And I think. That when this gets rewritten, and it has to be rewritten as a more mixed use to get more people living along the road.
Well, I think that's gonna be a big discussion.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think we're gonna have to sell that idea.
well, I mean, I think that's the gist of a lot of the studies we've done over the last few
And the
years.
zoning we've done.
And yeah. For that corridor to try and make it more mixed use.
I know, but I don't know that we've done a great job of selling that concept. And we have an opportunity to do that here.
So anyway, that's my take on.
So that's a rewrite.
LU3,
Mhm.
yes.
In terms of, LU4, making transition zones where business and residential uses coexist and mixed use corridors. I mean, that
A
is,
lot of progress.
yeah, I think there has been tremendous progress.
Except I have to ask the question again, why do we have B2A? I mean, even in here, it says, do something with it or get rid of it. Now. It's weird, you can't really do anything there, but you can do banks and offices by right, but you can't really do it. Because it's only one lot,
Yeah,
so it's just a weird, I don't know, it just seems like we shouldn't have that district, it doesn't do anything.
Well, I think when it was created, it was probably before the state owned the land across the street.
True. This board looked at the B2A a few years ago and just decided it's
irrelevant.
irrelevant.
Yeah.
Leave the map
But you
alone.
remember
There's no opportunity or threat there.
But for the Thornwood, it could have had some. Some implications when we rezoned B2.
But
Right.
now with their special permit, is that still an
Yeah, I'm
issue?
just saying.
Yeah, no, I hear what you're saying, I'm just, do we need?
Yeah.
Is there some action that must be taken?
I would just be for getting rid of that big red spot in the middle of the map.
It's an aesthetic thing
That's
about
for
the
me, it's all,
map.
yes, it's aesthetic.
Jerry, what did you want?
Well, back to goal 3, are we still looking at like zoning changes along there? I mean. Because like there's that property, right, at Fairview Terrace and Stockbridge Road. That where the building's been taken down, it's had a sign up for, build to suit for how long, and the only thing that's popped up there is a food truck. From time to time. And it's like, is it, and I mean, we've talked about this little, is, you know, is it the zoning really preventing? It's not, it's not parking.
Yeah, that business owner just doesn't want to develop there, at least right now.
Right now, okay.
But
And
the
that's-
zoning is, I mean, we
What you
fixed,
can,
quote unquote, or we've made. We've
what
done a
you
great job, I
can
think.
fit in there makes sense to be
Yeah.
able to develop. on.
Sure.
I mean, that's the challenge for us, right, is that we can sort of set the table, but we can't make anybody eat. Yeah.
Or cook the food.
Or cook the food, or build the kitchen.
So anyway, L4 and
I agree, L3 and L4 should be, but I do think we've made a lot of progress with L4 transition zones. I
think
don't think
both-
the work is done, but.
I mean, again, I mean, I don't. Revisiting these zoning for big box stores to me is a little complicated too,
I think to a certain extent, we've kind of already done that, haven't we?
to a degree, but I mean, 10,000 feet is still pretty big.
What more would you like to see?
I don't know. It's
Just
a.
that you'd like to
because- Yeah, the problem with the big box stores, is that it not only comes with a giant national chain, but it also comes with like giant national boring, nondescript, you know, architecture that's designed from a spreadsheet. And do we really want another Dollar General type building in town? I mean, that's what that kind of stuff
But
attracts.
they do serve the needs of a community. As much as you may hate Dollar General,
Yeah, but you know,
people shop there.
You could do it a different way.
I just dropped my kid off at school, and so it's in this cute little town in New Hampshire. And the town that's surrounding, like walkable for the college is like old downtown, like with some new restaurants and things but all the old architecture. And then you go outside of that little core, and that's where you have the box stores. Like you have to drive to them, can't walk to them, but that's where the Dollar Generals are and all the other big box stores. And I mean, do you really want box stores starting to kind of encroach into, you know?
Is there demand? From people
Yeah.
who want box stores?
Yeah, Home Depot moving in here, there's not enough people.
I don't think so. I mean, I think we've got site plan controls and we can look at design standards. I mean, a lot of these box stores, as we see them in our type of community, can fit into an urban fabric if that's what's available to them, right? I mean, you can.
But they do sort of, you're right, they do, especially if they're gonna build, they do look a certain way. And it's not like, if you're a dog character.
You know, this is one of those things I'll continue to bring up.
Size
These
of
buildings
building,
are just,
it's more-
they're kind of blighted when they're done, and then they're usually gone in 20 years. So you know, it's
Is-
not like a downtown building that's gonna be there forever, which is, I think, what as humanity, our goal should be to build permanent structures. Anyway,
I mean, we have Price Chopper, right, but that's kind of like tucked in. Like, imagine if that was turned and facing the street. Like if they had enough frontage, and if that, instead of deep that way, it was like.
It'd be more like big wine.
Yes.
okay, so
Okay.
that's a little off topic, I apologize for that,
All right.
but it's in
All
there,
things
it's
to
in there.
to discuss.
We don't.
Goal LU5, ensure all neighborhoods are safe places with housing and home business opportunities for people of all ages.
The one thing that stuck out here is split lots, where I know we've dealt with a lot of split lots, but we also didn't deal with some, and I wonder if that's a problem, it's an issue. I know, we did get a call once about a split lot on Stockbridge Road before we did the rezoning there, and it was really difficult to figure out what to do on the lot and how to do it.
I think we've gone kind of little by little to
Yeah.
correct a lot of those. There are still a few. I feel like this group with Chris's guidance has
Yeah.
identified a lot of like errant zoning things and tried to change them over the last 10 years.
A split lot means what?
Two zones
Two-
on
In
the
the same, okay.
Yeah,
same lot.
which
The zoning lot is-
complicates the development of the lot. Yeah. I'm happy to go through a very detailed example with you if you would like.
Well,
You should pick one of
love
those.
that.
One of those ones that's stumped.
I mean, the other thing that, housing opportunities, I don't know about home business opportunities, if that's an issue for people still, I think there's a lot of work from home, but. Does anyone have a sense of, are people trying to have home businesses?
I think when this was written, the zoning was not clear in terms of what was allowed as a
As a
home-based
business.
business. And so subsequent to this, there were amendments to the home occupation
And what,
provisions of the bylaw.
Okay,
do they define the home business as being a particular activity?
I think
Some of
So
There's some
it was customers
definitions.
coming in to buy something, retail, or is it just
There,
making something?
right, that
Letting
was the
happen.
subject of the clarifications and definitions that were put into the zoning code, because that didn't exist to. Well, it wasn't clear.
if we look at the definition section in our zoning, it talks about like home occupations, types of home occupations.
What's okay by right, at what point do you need a special permit?
I think the housing strategy for increasing housing density, that's been achieved like multiple times over,
Yes.
so that's
Three
good.
family zoning and ADUs and all that.
And
This was before, was this before the planning board really had a strong site plan
I don't know,
control mechanism? I can't
No,
recall when
actually.
that was put
I think we had it, but there wasn't much that came before us for
in.
it.
Yeah.
and I'd love to see more infill opportunities, I think, Chris, you said that we do have a map of the sewer water extents in the detail.
There should be one in there. I did send you one.
You did, yeah. So, I mean, one thing, I mean, this goes to the Stockbridge Road corridor too, like where we have sewer and water.
Yeah.
We can have higher density, we can have much higher density, but I think we all drive around and we're like, where can housing go, right? And if we had a real clear picture of like, what is the extent of sewer and water, because sometimes I'm surprised where we've got sewer and water. Would we think about changing the zoning for other areas in town because there's infrastructure
I
there?
think the only place where it's really a question is have state road towards Butternut. It goes out there.
I think sewer goes the whole way,
It goes to Butternut.
yeah,
So that's the, but it's really kind of residential, low density up there. I don't know that there's a zoning. An imminent zoning change that needs to happen along that route,
there's,
It was pretty much developed.
but the rest of it. It's basically the spine of the town.
are there opportunities for rear lot development there, Jonathan?
If you,
Because some of those lots are very deep, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, but they,
Katie's house goes right up to the mountain.
they run right into that hill that's.
He's got a good 6 iron distance behind his house.
For those of us who are uninitiated, what is roughly the distance for a 6 iron?
Sometimes he has to walk up the mountain to get the balls.
You have a 6 iron in your bag?
No, it's just not great.
All right, so I mean, I think this is probably a perennial one, right? Ensuring neighborhoods are
So,
safe places,
but
but
what-
what needs to be revisited?
I have a question about this though. How does this relate to safe places?
Safe places, I think it's probably somewhat subjective, but for me, it would relate to like. A sense of community and a sense of accessibility, and I think it doubles back on a conversation we're having about speed on roadways and,
Okay, but all of these strategies relate to zoning.
yeah, and I think these are about our residential neighborhoods,
Yeah.
right?
Okay, but is that the target here of the
I don't-
zoning, or is it just
I think
increased density in our
We
town?
may want to expand, where, because we were talking about trying to add more mixed use places, and so is this kind of at odds with mixed use places? I don't know that we're trying to turn all the residential areas into mixed use, right? But
No, I'm just
maybe the
wondering what the
reverse.
aspect of safe
Yeah,
is.
no, I think that's a good.
Yeah.
point,
Yeah.
Because it's not really addressing the strategies.
No,
Yeah.
To a degree, it's
What-
peripheral.
I keep, we get so focused on zoning bylaws, and Chris
Yeah.
keeps raising the point that there are other parts of planning and thinking about the town, and safe is one of them.
Yeah, I mean, with climate change and. Our aging population, I mean, there's a lot of safety issues around our neighborhoods. I don't know if that, always this is the place that.
What was this one trying to say? Cause it's for all ages and income.
Yeah,
I mean, I guess I would interpret this a little bit, kind of the way we've been approaching housing is like, we want housing opportunities for everyone,
yeah,
right?
I would view, I would like this to be a housing thing and not a safety thing.
Sure, sure,
I guess that's the.
yeah.
But
Although reading in between the lines, you know, it's free from odor, glare, noise, like things that might disturb us. So maybe that was the discussion. I don't know if you remember if there was a specific discussion about it. Yeah, okay, well, there probably is. Jackie's had access to the archives. I don't know if you've seen anything.
Which archives?
The master plan
Oh,
archives, like there's.
I'm stuck in 1970s.
Okay.
And when it comes up, like these words around density are often, right? So when, like the fear of density is because it becomes unsafe. And you're afraid of people, I don't know about ages, maybe, but you're afraid of people of certain incomes. Right, that's the fear around when density comes.
I think that's often unspoken, but probably true.
Well, it seems like sometimes it's spoken in public.
Yeah.
hearings.
Well, we've seen plenty of opportunities where even, you know, higher price point housing is proposed and people don't want other people or new people. New change is different, so scary is different is scary, so. Just recognizing the time, so I mean, obviously we need to revisit that one, right? It's still a concern, but it needs to be revisited. Goal 6, rural areas and gateways preserve natural resources, agriculture, and promote sensitive development. Here's that B2A again for you, Pedro.
Handy eye. Yeah, that's our gateway, is to drive straight through an industrial zone.
Some of that is legacy zoning, I think.
But when we discuss changing it, we always discuss, we wanna preserve. Like a certain business opportunity, right? Certain. And do we wanna revisit that? Because we did.
Where are we talking?
Well, I know.
The I isn't mentioned specifically in this one, so.
But it's the gateway, if you look at the gateway map in there. The route north, traveling north up 7.
I mean, so you're talking about expanding this to discuss that.
Yeah, I mean, it's. Just a comment, What was that comment?
There's a few spots in 7.
I think not much has changed with the gateways in terms of preserved land and agriculture. And we don't have any recourse against A&R subdivisions that just like Hurlburt Road, used to be all fields and now it's all like pretty much lots down the frontage, and I don't know, probably other roads too, Jonathan can.
We did do the roundabout. In terms of the gateway.
True, I was trying to figure out where you're going with that, but gateway ties it all together.
Like actually, revolving door.
But that's like the actual gate.
What did you just say?
Said we'll build the arch, so.
That's what I heard you say.
Like St. Louis.
I mean, I think this is probably gonna be still important to the community. I don't know that. I don't know that it necessarily needs to be a goal. It seems like there's a lot of protections in place on those gateway lands. Be they regulatory, or if they're not regulatory, just natural resource floodplains and wetlands are gonna prevent.
But if somebody goes to the zoning map looking for gateways into town, they're gonna run into a big bloody blotch in the north of town. I don't think that's really nice.
But they're gonna run into a
There-
hotel with a light show.
Or that.
So,
Gateway
I think
hotel.
gateway is a very kind word to describe what we have. I think it's more poetic than the actual experience.
So this last one is, I'm not really sure that we've done a great job with that. Because our bylaw is pretty dense, and I think the more we add and change it, the denser it kind of gets.
So, but it starts out by saying the previous master plans have had only limited practical impact. So I do think that the approach that's been taken since that time is more policy driven.
Prescriptive.
Yeah. And prescriptive in part, because I think a goal has been to try to eliminate uncertainty, right, and eliminate inconsistencies. Is it perfect? No,
No,
right, so, but I think the needle has been moved. We're not making decisions based on opinions, right? Doesn't mean we don't have opinions, we're just making our decisions based on a set of criteria. Which makes it more equitable, right?
yeah, I don't mean to disparage the work that's been done, but I think this is just an ongoing thing.
Yeah,
No, and the language is interesting in here because it, sometimes it says improve zoning revised, but nothing is a really commandment that you have to do it. It's, so these are strategies, these aren't rules. So, I know, that's what. It's all right.
I mean, for my 2 cents, I think, there's no rewrite here. And I really can't think of any other land use issue that's come up lately. Perhaps there's something to do with climate that could be included in the section.
to that point, because I've been trying to think of like what's not in here that should be in here, and that's why I was wondering if we had a hazard mitigation plan, if it's identified housing in areas that maybe are currently low-lying that aren't in the floodplain, but maybe in the floodplain if something changed, or are in drainage ways that have been impacted by flooding events. So from a land use standpoint, that's kind of where my head goes, is like what properties are already being impacted, and we wouldn't want to encourage more development there. We would want to try and maybe offset, retreating from floodways is a way to prevent repetitive damage. And so do we want to think about,
So that could be something that would be in
and
a new strategy.
and I think that data is in our hazard mitigation plan.
It is, and to a large extent, the floodplain special permits have preempted large scale development within hazard areas. It's not too much of an issue. Compared to- I'm just reminded that when this was written, we didn't have guidelines for solar development. That's something this board has talked about, battery energy storage.
Yeah.
That's an emerging land use issue.
So having a new goal, like, that has some things addressing these new climate issues. Yeah.
We're getting questions about geothermal wells that we've never dealt with before. That's a very
Yeah,
case by case basis. It's not a
But see, it's like
townwide thing. but-
looking at this and thinking about down the road, what does the new master plan look like? Is it going to be an additive to the goal and it's in italics because it's just been added, or is it pulled out in it's a separate addendum? So you've got, this is climate change.
Jackie, we
These
just
are
don't
all.
know this.
No, I'm just
We're
saying,
going
in my
through
mind,
this.
as
You're-
we're going
you're
through
teasing
this.
through.
We want to get to the end.
No, it
Before we
informs
take a bite.
how I respond to, in part, because it's about emphasis and narrative, and this is a literary description, this is for the person who doesn't understand zoning laws, and this is for the person who, it's just a more specific goal. It's the way I think, it's helping me
Well, I mean,
plan.
my personal opinion is based on the review of the use section, that we wouldn't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, but it does require some substantial revisions.
Yeah.
That,
Yeah, I agree with that.
And it's interesting because that's kind of what the decision was in 2010, 2011 was goals from the 1990s plan are good. We just haven't done anything to achieve them. So the goals here are not remarkably different from that plan.
Yeah, I
It's
mean-
just that the boards and the voters actually went forward and implemented. them.
yeah, there's nothing my lives.
okay. All right. Thank you. So new land use plans, you said open space is in the works or going to be in the works?
An open space plan update will be in the works. We're working with Berkshire Regional Planning staff to identify enough funding to undertake that. It was a plan that we tried to update just before COVID, and we had to set it aside.
Mhm.
So we're just waiting to hear on a grant.
Okay. And then there's the hazard mitigation and climate vulnerability or climate adaptation plan, and that is on the website.
It's either on the planning department page or the planning board page.
And then there's the complete streets policy, which may peripherally be related.
Certainly impacts the transportation section, but also kind of neighborhood connections.
Yeah. And what other plans have we done that have a land use component in them?
I think I referenced last time the agricultural commission's efforts related to, was the growing better Great Barrington line. Oh, no, I mentioned that to the CK.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Growing better Great Barrington, it's on the AgComs page.
Does discussion of herds and subdivisions fall into this or any?
First, it's a part of the bylaw.
I was just thinking of it as land use and the aesthetics of it or
Well,
the implications on land use and.
there's a discussion in here about clustering, zoning and resource protection, so that's definitely a land use issue, yeah.
And I haven't spent any time with the figures, but in appendix or section 2 of the master plan with all the maps, it's probably worth looking at some of the figures. You know, I don't think we're gonna be able to suss out the land use one in particular, because it's a very, very busy figure. But we would certainly want an updated land use map at some point, but I was interested in this one that had suitable areas. It's on page 39 of the figure 22, suitable areas for commercial and residential development. On page 39 of the second volume. And I wonder to what extent I mean, I think there's a community conversation, Jackie, to be had around that figure. Because some infill development has occurred. Right, but to Pedro's point earlier, like there's nothing on the 23 corridor up towards Butternut. And yet we have seen some infill development occur out there.
Yeah, it's a new is it an ADU, but right on the road?
Really?
Is there? Is that new?
We built it.
Is it in that first little neighborhood? Where-
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And then there's the it's the 11 housing unit development that Forest Springs, how come I can't remember that one? So anyway, I just thought we should revisit some of the figures too and just see which ones are really relevant still and maybe need to be updated. All right, do we want to think about for the next time, maybe reading ahead in natural resources, open space and recreation? Or do you think, Chris, we should sort of set that aside and see if you guys do a study and then reflect on the findings of the study with a little more information?
No.
Again, I think we can go through it, just peripherally, like at surface level, just go through it and make opinions about the section. And whether or not it needs to go away or be rewritten or just updated. I think I found this exercise helpful once we got started.
At least to familiarize yourself with it, and go back to.
I don't think that. Collective study.
Okay,
You
so,
can do a few chapters.
yeah.
You can work ahead.
For next time, let's read chapters 4 and 5.
Okay. In your textbook.
Yeah, in your master plan, and we will revisit them.
I like the idea of doing a section, a meeting. I think it's doable, and it's only 6 meetings or 7 meetings, I think, that we'll do this and
I feel
I
like
think it's easy.
if we do 4 and 5 next time, we can spend the whole meeting on 6, because I feel like 6 being housing will be a beefier discussion. What do you think?
I think 4 and 5 is gonna be beefy.
Yeah,
I think we
Well,
don't.
let's
let's start with 4 and see how we go,
I
right?
don't discriminate, so
Okay.
I treat open space and recreation as equal.
So Chris, in terms of agenda, we'll do 4 and 5 if there's time.
Yeah.
At the next meeting.
So we'll prep for 4 and 5, we'll do what we can.
Yes. Thank you all.
Wonderful.
All right, Chris, do you have a town planner?
No, can I?
Oh,
jump in for a
sorry,
sec?
yeah, go ahead.
I'm just going back to, the community compact
Yes.
exercise. And I'm just wondering, I know that what I'd love to have when we get into meeting with the community, I'm into visualization.
Mhm.
And if we're going to be talking about Stockbridge Road, if we're
Mhm.
going to be talking about different things that are not necessarily obvious to people, I think it would be very helpful to have some visualization.
Mhm.
And it'd be great, I think, I keep thinking of Ed Ruscha's work when photographed streets in a certain period
Mhm.
of time, and you see it, and then how it changes over time.
Mhm.
Wish we had a photographer. Do we have a photographer or a videographer who's gone,
Gregory Woodson.
who's actually made an effort to document what the town looks like
You
this
should
year? when-
contact Gary Lavelle or Bernie Drew, they have mounds of collections of.
But no, it's like a
streets.
systematic work, not just, is there, because like Ed Ruscha is known for doing that. Is there a photographer was hired by the town to document this neighborhood or this
I doubt
street
it.
or something like that?
Like, over what time period are you?
Well, I'm just basically when the master plan goes out. Each time there's a master plan and you're talking.
Oh,
area.
that's a good question. I don't think so. It's funny you asked that though, because I was looking back through Google Earth, because they've got the look back period and the photos sort of deteriorate once you get into the 90s, but yeah, just to see if it would be useful to have that up tonight, to like look at different neighborhoods and go back
It's
10
really-
years just
it's-
to see what has
Hmm.
changed.
I'm so doggone visual, that would mean so much to me if I will be able to see then and now kind of thing.
Yeah.
Or the street as a whole, if we're talking about.
I think the challenge is scale,
Atmosphere.
right? Like, if it was a lot over,
This is a small town.
it's really not though, like geographically, it's a big area, so. But, I get what you're saying. I'm not sure there's like easy tool. I looked to see if Mass Mapper had more historic photos on it.
Chris, you
because-
know, in the city, the insurance companies had, up until the 1940s, I think, they would go around and photograph all the blocks and every property that they insured.
So a lot of the old photos that you'll find among historians here in town from insurance.
Yes, I was wondering if that ever happened in town.
Yeah, it did.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's not, there's no central collection.
I bet there's some in the attic at Ramsdale.
I don't know, I looked for the historic Sanborn fire insurance maps for our town. I've been searching high and low and
There are some.
there are some, they're very limited, they're available online through the Library of Congress. Up to 1913, but they're primarily just like the core of downtown here and the core of Housatonic. They're not, like, they don't get into the outlying areas where there wasn't like as much insurable property.
Right.
So,
We have the scans from the 20s.
you do,
Yeah, I think that's because outside of the towns was all farms.
and if it burnt down, maybe,
Yeah, right.
yeah, exactly. But I agree, Jack, it'd be nice if that's a tool. I don't know, Gary does have,
I mean, I know these guys.
Yeah.
I've met with them all and talked to them.
maybe yes,
I can.
Yeah.
If we get a little checklist of what we want.
sure,
It's
sure.
totally possible.
So in terms of, you raised that under the community compact best practices, are
No,
you
I was
thinking, can
wondering
we,
if there's any, I'm into visualization of Stockbridge Road
I see,
with infill or something, not like infill, something when we're talking about it, what do we want to do? What would it look like in an ideal world?
so you're thinking future
I'm
forward,
thinking when we're trying to write the plan and we're talking about going forward and covering the next 10 years.
you want
What-
photorealistic rendering?
Not doesn't have to be photorealistic, but it could be sort of realistic. Not it just something that would give an idea
Mhm.
of what it might look
So
like.
you need a photographer and an architect.
I would like to find out.
You might be able to generate it using AI. I'm not joking.
No, it's true.
Yeah, I'm not joking at all.
It's all you prompted.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
But,
But I think that's a good point. We probably need,
but I was thinking about some money to pay somebody to create certain key images that would help with presentations. And Housatonic and maybe in Stockbridge Road.
and my experience with master plans and comprehensive plan updates is that when you bring a consultant on board and, you know, maybe you're writing a grant to cover some of the consultant's costs, among the things you would ask them to do is to create a series of visualizations, maybe for key properties where there's an opportunity for infill or something like that. So I think that's, I think what you're asking for though is can we accelerate some of that for the community conversation piece, which may.
I'm just looking for money to pay a really good architect to do certain things for the town.
So you said there was no town planners report?
Oh, I didn't get there.
Oh, okay.
Just briefly. Sorry, excuse me. So in terms of, so the town will be awarding the construction grant, construction job for the North Plain Road housing subdivision to Reifenberg Construction. They are the successful bidder to build out that subdivision. So we're really happy it came in under our budget.
Just for the infrastructure or the whole thing?
They'll do the infrastructure for the town. They may or may not partner with Habitat to do the sites. I don't know that, that'll be separate. So, yeah, I, along with the Housing Trust, are really happy to report that.
Is it a local company or where is it from?
Reifenberg is based in Troy. They've done a great deal of work for the town recently. They did Division Street Bridge, they did Lake Mansfield, they did the retaining wall in South Main. A lot of downtown work for us. We have excellent experience with them. Yeah, really pleased.
Do you know when that's starting?
I don't have a start date. Also, the town received as the lead community for the 3 towns of Great Barrington, Stockbridge, and Egremont, $1.3 million in a community development block grant to continue the housing rehab program.
That's wonderful. Thank you for.
So that's an
pursuing that.
important part of our housing strategy.
When you get additional funds, does it roll programmatically right into the current program? And so applications just that have come in, maybe that were in backlog now can be,
We keep awaiting.
you do keep a waiting list, okay,
That's all I have. for tonight.
okay, thank you, and no big applications coming before us or anything? Okay, great, board subcommittee updates, issues and concerns, John,
Let's come back to me.
okay, Jackie,
Nothing.
nothing, Jeremy?
So, CBC met, and we have a hearing date, for the, plan, 2024 plan, is that the right year? Chris, made some edits and I meant to actually send it out and I didn't. One of the edits that Chris made was in the priorities and part of it was the community will give the highest priority to projects sponsored by the Affordable Housing Trust and the second highest priority to town-owned property preservation of historic town-owned buildings. When we discussed in the committee, discussed it, they didn't seem so jazzed about the highest priority. Meaning funds to the Affordable Housing Trust. They really seem to take on the second as the highest priority. Then after a little bit of discussion seemed to be going that way. Then we had a presentation from the trust, and I don't know if it, and it was very good. I don't know if it moved where people were at. But we'll see. My personal feeling, and I don't know if the board feels strongly. another way, and then I can adjust my personal feeling. But my personal feeling is with CPA funds, I think there's some clear ways that we get a lot of bang for the bucks. And I'm not sure if it's in just straight moving the town's burden to CPA funds, meaning just preserving town-owned properties. I mean, if we're using that as a way to get grants and things, then I think that's great. But if it's just removing, you know, line items from the town's budget, that I'm not so sure about, because with the trust, we do get a lot of bang for that, especially property procurement. We are able to, you know, the trust is able to buy properties not through the normal ways that towns have to acquire properties. They can be very nimble and quick about it. And then, you know, then they can take their time to decide how those properties will be used. And I think I think the committee understands that. But I don't know if that's a really high priority for them. We do have a dwindling amount of land available in town. And properties come up sometimes. I don't know, you know, what is even going to be available to the trust, but
Is your concern the prioritization, and you would like to offer a different view on prioritization?
Well, for example, so we funded through 100% funding of the memorial field. And I mean, I think it's great. I think the work that was done and that they had extra funds and they could work out Olympia, at those fields as well. I think that was good. I didn't personally support, I mean, I voted in favor of it during the discussion. I didn't support, you know, funding all of it. I thought, you know, with CPA funds, you know, if we funded 50% of it and the town, you know, footed the other 50%, I thought that was a better use. I don't know what the town got out of it, except that, you know, we reduced that line item in the budget for that loan.
I'd just like to say one thing about the town projects and CPA. My memory may be mistaken, but I'm pretty sure that when the CPA was presented at town meeting, the advocates for the CPA stood up in front of town meeting and said, the reason this works is because we can do town projects and get state money to subsidize those town projects. And the statement at the time was that the highest priority would be to town projects.
But
That's what was
affordable-
said on the town meeting
Yeah.
for those people, and there were people who changed their votes based on that.
No, and I agree with you, and that was said, and I agree. But the idea that the trust is not part of the town, right, when it is part
But I
of
mean,
the
you
town.
just said, I mean, you know, like if half the money goes to, from the CPC for Memorial Field, for example,
Yeah.
and the other half comes from town, well, it's all town money. It's all money out of taxpayers' pockets, it's just that the part that's paid for by CPC gets matched to some extent by state money, the part that's paid for out of town does not.
I mean, the reality is that there's some things that the town is willing to fund and not willing to fund. I don't, you know, and. I mean, I think the town is always gonna fund to, you know, to upgrade Memorial Field.
So I don't wanna belabor this too much, cause the job is,
Yeah.
project is done now. I think you're making a good point about, you know, how funds are allocated, but just in general, do you get the sense that housing is a priority still for
Well,
CPC?
Housing, like.
Cause there's been a ton of money.
No,
put
there was a
towards
ton,
it.
and last year
Yeah.
it was all housing.
Right.
It turned out to be, I mean, I was shocked when, you know, it happened. I was just like, wow.
And it's just from the start of it, it sounded like, okay, we did all that work on housing, okay, this year, maybe not.
So a shift in.
But I agree with you, Malcolm, and I think, you know, town. But there still is this feeling in the committee that the trust isn't really part of the town, or it's just, you know, I
Maybe
mean,
the
and
trust-
hopefully that
The trust
report
may need
changed.
to do some education, like, I think that's maybe a problem we can't solve.
I mean, and I'll share that, what they shared with us,
Maybe
because it was.
encourage the trust to,
No, actually, the trust has made a lot of changes that were super well received by the committee. And so I'm really hopeful that maybe that initial thing will change and they'll get some funding, because I don't know how much. You know, funding is available in the cycle for the trust from the town.
Is the issue with the committee and the trust that the trust isn't presenting a plan that the commission is willing to fund?
Well, they were,
Or
I
is
mean,
that
in
what-
general
I remember that
projects,
that CPC, they were requiring that the trust come to them with a project.
with projects, is, definitely that's, I think, was the feeling. I think the trust also presented like where they're at with their budget for the upcoming cycle. So I think that was super helpful for the committee to see. And there's been some changes in the trust, and I think those were really well received.
And they
There's
have, but they
been-
have a track record now.
Well, they have a track record, and also they're reporting, and I think they're committed to reporting in a certain way to, which is nice to them, but, yeah, and so, and all I'm asking of this board is like, do we have feelings one way or the other? I mean, I'm sort of starting to feel like maybe I shouldn't say much in the CPC because of what happened last year. I mean, I was super happy with how it turned out and, you know.
I
And
think this is the reason that the program gets reprioritized every year, right? Because priorities can shift and probably should shift so that the opportunities for funding get spread around a little bit. I don't know.
but it wasn't, from how the plan was written, that wasn't, to me, it didn't turn out like that was what was funded. It was like, oh, okay, sounds like all the way.
The public hearing, Jeremy, is the 10th of September, I think.
Yes,
So comments should be submitted either by this board or by you as individuals.
yeah, before then.
To,
because-
they can go to the committee, care the.
Yeah, so if anything is gonna go into that plan, the plan will probably be voted on. At the end of that meeting, by the end of that meeting, I don't think it'll go on beyond that.
Okay.
And then, the other thing is, we did. Those weren't tentative dates, right? Those were the dates for so we did, set dates for our meetings, but I think more importantly, due dates for step 1 and step 2s. Step 1s are due, by 4 p.m. On November 6th, Wednesday, November 6th, and, excuse me, step 1s, and step 2s, Wednesday, December 4th.
Okay, cool, thank you. Malcolm? Andrew?
I have a question, I guess, for Chris. It has to do with footnote 2. On the table of uses. Does anybody know what that is?
Not off the top of my head.
So this is part of the problem, but in the end, I don't think it matters anymore. So table 2. It was a result of probably, as in my experience, the most hard fought zoning amendment that we have ever made at town meeting, which was the incentive for developers to build. If they provide 10% of their units as affordable, they can build by right. You guys remember that? Yeah. So that wound up in a footnote, which, you know, I'm not happy with, but at this point, I don't know that it's relevant, really. So I'm wondering if that's something we should look at to strike out of the zoning bylaw for the next. It's not relevant because we passed regulations this year that allow by right development.
Mhm,
And that,
okay.
did I miss that? Did that get? Was that approved by the AG or?
No, that's a really good question.
Yeah, that's my next question, is when we're gonna have an update.
So
Jonathan?
been waiting for that.
Nothing? Okay. I don't have anything
Footnote.
either. You guys okay if I move on to citizens? Claudia, anything, citizen speak? Do you have anything that you wanted to add to the discussion?
No, Brandy, you ask me that every week, and honestly, I'm a big girl with a big mouth, no offense. I wanna say something, and since I speak, I'll get it.
Wanted to offer the
Thanks.
opportunity.
Thanks.
Is there anyone online that has any citizen speak? All right, seeing none, we'll adjourn at 7:50. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.